it's like by definition, identity is something we think of as being consistent. Like I am who I was yesterday. We say we change and so on, but basically we think it's still the same person, right? But anyone who's done public speaking knows who we are, how we experience ourselves, really, really changes depending on our environment. So, like, I have to, because I don't public speak a lot, imagine if someone does it a lot, maybe they develop a persona especially for that, or maybe they just learn to relax. But I tend to go into kind of altered state of consciousness with public speaking, like a mild hallucinogen or something.
Dissociative.
I would agree.
Yeah, potentially dissociative for sure. And I think that's just magnification of our experiences as people, that who we are and how we experience ourselves changes constantly according to not just our own feelings, obviously, but who we're talking with, who we're interacting with, what the circumstances are. So, well, I think that's probably the whole
I can't
point
wait to read the book.
Huh?
I can't wait to read the book. It's all very interesting and looking for an ending now. I want to read it.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the idea, I suppose.
Cliffhanger.
That's it. So, obviously it all centers around this idea of identity. Who am I? Which is traditionally, that's the question of the spiritual seeker. There's a guru, a supposedly enlightened guy in the past. He's dead now, because I won't remember his name. Might have been Ramakrishna. I think it was actually Ramakrishna. Anyway, he claimed that if you want to get enlightened, you just have to ask the question, who am I? Until you get enlightened. You just got to, that's it. The rest of your life, you just got to just go around asking that question. Don't think anything else. Don't just stay on that question.
You said the real us is deep and buried, though.
What?
You said the real us is deep and buried that we're never going to find out.
I certainly didn't say the second part.
You said you can never get to it, or
No, I didn't. I have a record.
you can never find out.
This would be interesting. I mean, if I had said that, it would be very interesting
I
too.
don't remember.
Yeah.
You were in hallucinogenic state, say.
Yeah, well, that would be interesting. But what would be as or more interesting and more likely is that I didn't say it, but that you heard or you extrapolated that part from the first part.
I remember distinctly, because I remember thinking it was weird that you said it.
Yeah. Well, I'll watch it back and I'll let you know. I'll be pretty shocked if I said that.
It's deep and you'll never get there, something along those lines.
Or we might not get there today. Maybe that's what it was.
It might have been in the context of like fantasy. Through fantasy, we never get there. True. Anyway, obviously we can't check that now. So what was I saying? Where I was, so
Just the question.
yeah, the question, who am I? So yeah, this is a question that that I've attempted to. Obviously, I'm exploring it, but I mean, this thing, for example, is a partial answer to the question, who am I? Not this deep self, but who am I? Gosh, how do I put this? I guess I did bring up enlightenment. So, who am I in the meantime on my way to enlightenment, optimistically speaking? Right? Because the question, who am I, implies, or the quest for enlightenment implies that we are not who we think we are. Right? There is a possibility of reaching some state that currently we don't have access to. So the question is, if we want to get to who am I really, my true self, then the first question is who is this I that I think I am?
It's more important too. The question is the hard part. The answer is not so hard. We know who we are. But what does that mean? That's the unraveling. It's the question that's actually tough. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be me? Why am I the same person I was when I was 12?
Right.
That's the question. That's the hard part. If we knew the answer, if we knew the question, the answer would probably fall out.
Possibly.
And they're subject to change depending on what's happened that day.
Exactly.
The
exactly.
same question tomorrow, you may answer differently for a different reason, whatever's on your mind at that time. Could be a
Yes.
negative or a positive that
Yes. And
determines your answer.
right, and I would say that a lot of that dialogue goes on internally, in fact. Like there is a part of us that's constantly asking, who am I? Who am I today? Who am I this time? And we refer to various different data banks to answer that question to ourselves. So that's what the diagram, because not everyone can see the diagram here, but it's memories, qualities, beliefs, preferences. So memories, that's self-explanatory. We have a set of memories, most of them kind of not inaccessible, but we don't refer to them. They're there, but we're not actually pulling them up and referring to them. But whenever we need some sort of confirmation or reference point, who am I right now, we can refer to memories to kind of reassure us, oh, I'm the person who did that or didn't, right? And then we've got qualities, that's like, I'm a kind person, I'm an angry person, I'm a clever person, and so on. Yeah. I'm a moody person, I'm a hopeful person, I'm an optimistic person, I'm a religious person, I'm blah, 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 you know, a whole list of qualities. They vary, but basically, you know, we always have a current set of qualities that we more or less identify ourselves as. Then we've got beliefs, that's self-explanatory too, the things we believe about ourselves and the world as we change, but while we're holding them as beliefs, they're not mutable. They have to be pretty solid. If it's a question, that's not a belief. So yeah. And a lot of, I think about beliefs, of course, is that we don't see them as beliefs. Like if we see this as a belief, then we're not believing it. It's when we think we know. Beliefs are things that we think we know. It's also beliefs too, because you could say I believe in God, but yeah, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say I know. I might, but I might not. You know, there's that fuzzy. There's those areas, but there's certainly plenty of things we think we know. But if we were really to get down and root around these animals, we'd realise that we don't know. We just consistently told ourselves that they're true. Then the last one is preferences, and that was actually the whole point of this diagram, was just to illustrate, and I'm sure you could have a different set and whatever. I'm not saying that these are the four primary, whatever, constituents of identity, but I'd say it's a reasonable working model, and preferences really are important. If you look at Facebook now, I mean the Facebook culture, so much of it is about what we like, lists of things, kind of what I was doing as a kid, right? Making a list of the things that I like, putting pictures on my walls to reaffirm this idea of who I was based on what I like, what I'd chosen to identify with. So that's preference. So, when we think about movies and other things as being, well, we don't necessarily think about them as being absolutely fundamental to constituting who we are and how we behave in the world. But if we were to group it all together in a whole subset of preferences, we'd find that actually, we would be pretty defensive about our preferences. We don't like it if somebody tells us that the things that we've chosen to prefer are no good. Yeah? So they're actually quite similar to beliefs, preferences. In fact, all these kind of overlap. Qualities, beliefs, preferences, even memories, because I prefer things in memory. Like Clint Eastwood, he's not here now. I just have all these nice memories. Like the Where Eagles Dare thing. It wasn't really apparently about Clint Eastwood. I didn't mention actually that when I turned 40, not on the day, but I mean around that time, I saw a picture of my father He had me on his shoulders when I was about 5, and I have no memory of that, but I also have no memory of him acting like a father, so it was quite a surprising picture, yeah, an external, non-memory thing. Oh my God! And he's smiling, and he looks like Clint Eastwood. I noticed myself actually, the only time I do kind of look like Clint Eastwood is if I have a big broad smile, which is almost never, unfortunately. But once in a while it happens, and it's very once in a while somebody snaps a photo of it, and I'm like, oh gosh, that's Clint Eastwood's smile. And that was my father too. So there's that, but then, as I said, with Where Eagles Dare, that movie didn't mean anything to me at 5 or 6. But somehow that experience of seeing it must have meant something profound, because I remembered it. So that appears to be a memory of one thing, but it's a memory of something else. It appears to be a memory of the movie, but actually it's the memory of being with my family, right? So our memories are like that. They're not value-free or devoid of qualities. Same with our beliefs, our preferences. Well, that's what I'm saying, that they're all actually, you could say that there's 4 sides to the single square. Literally is that in the diagram, but I mean, like, who knows what we're talking about here? Like, as in internally, we're configured internally by these sets of memories, beliefs, qualities and preferences, but we can't locate them. You can't have them surgically removed or erased or have other ones implanted, not yet anyway. Give it a few more years.
This book's
I discovered over the past 6 years, it's getting lighter now, but you're hitting something that happened to me where I realized that my identity and my credibility was built, my sense of it was built in my clan, my friends and family who I decided to be tight with. And my sister started to get short-term memory loss, and I felt abandoned when she couldn't remember our history that made up part of who I was. And then it started to happen with a really close extended family member who I built a lot again, and he started to forget the memories because he's older, right? He's starting to lose that part of thing. And I was so angry. You remember this, right? I was so angry with him. I would be in his face like, you remember this, like just kind of going off on him. And I didn't know until years later why it was I was so disturbed. It took me so long. People would have to point out, you're so angry with him. I do it. And I go, yeah, he should remember this. Because it was part of my identity, just sort of my credibility, people's following.
So that's like, so what I was saying about preferences is that we need people to validate our preferences, just as we need people to validate our memories, and our qualities. We want, if we think of ourselves as kind, we want people to experience this and echo that back at us. And the other one, beliefs. Obviously, we want people to validate our beliefs, because
our identity is something like that.
if you're the only one who believes it, you're going to start to doubt. Maybe it's not true.
Yeah, I have something.
Good.
Actually, Katie kind of put it in words for me. When I left Ontario and came out west here, I spent a month living in the Cape. And for me, I just needed to get away from everything, like who I was. And one of the things that really popped out to me was that when you are in a community, what their images of you, it actually helps support who you are. But when you're out on your own, and you only have your own identity to support, you start picking and choosing the things to fight for. And at that point, when you separate from your community, you can find out who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
But is that who you really are? Or are you, maybe you're somebody different when you're in that community, and that is who you really are too. There's a
I
constant
can't argue
evolution
with
there.
that, because when I was with the community, I was wholeheartedly part of that community.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like how much of our behaviour is automatic. So because we're socialised, as I said, that's learning imitative behaviours that will work in society, and so a lot of that becomes automatic. And so when we're surrounded by people, that's basically the safe, that's the unwritten contract, the unspoken agreement, that we will behave in certain ways that are expected of us in order to make others feel safe, and then we can feel safe. And so a lot of it, just the basic stuff, how are you, I'm fine, which I now have to experience on a daily basis at the thrift store. And I never used to do that stuff, because I could avoid it. Just that, that automatic behaviour that's imitative and that's reassuring. Like so much of society is based in that. And yeah, so if you unplug and go out in nature, you're not self-conscious, right? That's number one. Why would you be self-conscious? Just birds and bears and fish and, that's it. You're butt naked and running around rocks. And, right? So of course that's liberating, but I would agree, really, that actually I don't think we can discover who we are separate from human beings.
No.
And I don't necessarily say, who am I? I say I am. I am a mother, I am a wife, I am a potter, I am a part of the human race, I am a, more often than I would say, who am I would identify with I am.
Right, so that's, for me, that's the reason, as I understand it, to ask the question, who am I? Because the question, who am I, really is ... Once you take away all of these other things.
But you can't take them all away, they are.
You can't, they will be taken away.
At some point, I guess,
Who am I without my body? Who am I without my mind? Who am I without my feelings? Eventually it becomes what am I, I would say, but we don't necessarily want to go all the way into that. But what we do know is we're conscious. We are conscious, and so you could say we are consciousness. I don't want to get too new agey, but we do experience ourselves as consciousness. So that is the baseline of our experience. That is more guaranteed and absolutely verifiable. It's the only thing that is verifiable. I can't really verify that I'm a husband or a son or a brother. And I don't want to go into this postmodern thing of these are just social constructs either, but I kind of am going into that. Like, what are the moving parts if I am a brother or I am a husband? There's an awful lot of assumption in there that we're agreeing that this means that, You could say that about consciousness too, but at least it's a kind of bedrock. Okay, we don't really know what consciousness is, but we do know without it, nothing happens.
Nothing we're conscious of. See, I don't know. I mean, mind, body, spirit, they are different, even though they're components of our identity. There are certain characteristics that are peculiar to each one. Personally, I think consciousness is a characteristic of the mind. Not the spirit, nor the body. So that's
the body is conscious without a mind. But do you think that mind...
Self-conscious? It's
response
to
to
stimuli. That's not the same as consciousness.
No, well, I wasn't talking about self-consciousness.
Yeah.
I was talking about consciousness.
It's
so, like the baby that was here,
mm-hmm.
Do you think that Maya has a mind?
Yes, but I've also seen babies. I saw it when I was in nursing school. A baby that had perfect skin tone, Govinsky reflex when you took, and had no brain. It was run entirely by the oblongata. The entire head was filled with spinal fluid. Consciousness is a little tricky.
Okay, but what do you mean by mind?
Mind is something, okay, I can't give you the definitive thing of it, but I think it's something like, it's generated by the brain in the sense that a magnetic wave field is generated by a magnet.
Mind was not body. You said it wasn't the body.
I didn't say it. I said that it's not the same. All three things are one part of us. And we talk about it, we compartmentalize it, but it doesn't mean that they're distinct. Just like you say, cut up your memories and this sort of thing. Our mind isn't separate from our brain. Our spirit isn't separate from our body. But they're different realities. How would I say this? I can't without, see, the trouble is I've studied Kabbalah for a long time, and my vocabulary is all Kabbalistic. There is an aspect, the analogy I usually use when I'm trying to explain it is a magnet and a magnetic field. They're distinct things, but one can't exist without the other. But a magnetic field, if you take the magnet a while, exists independently for a short period of time. There's no mistaking the two, and yet they're part of the whole. You Excuse me? I think consciousness is is a mental characteristic. And a mental characteristic is one aspect of us, of who we are, and it's not identical with.
Okay, so then I'm not talking about that kind of consciousness. I'm not referring to that kind of consciousness. I'm talking about the kind of consciousness that knows. No, not self-conscious. That knows if I were to stick a pencil in your thigh right now, you would know it, regardless of what your mind had to say about it. It's sensation.
But I can phantom pain. I can feel the same pencil without you touching me.
What?
Phantom pain. Where you have
phantom pain.
missing a limb and you still feel the response. Other people, I have a stretch in my thigh where I have no nerves.
Yeah.
The injury.
All right. Well, I don't want to get tangled up.
All I'm saying is that you can't make
thinking.
them. They're not a one-to-one correspondence. I don't think.
All right. Well, that's fine.
Okay.
You can have your belief, and
Yeah, yeah.
I'll stick with
No,
mine. But
I'm not trying
I
to
definitely don't want to get into abstract discussion. I don't find it helpful, and this is in my own experience. To me, it's all about bringing it down to the body and the lived experience. So, to me, I mean, from what I understand about human beings and life and existence, it begins with the body. Now, we could go into theology and philosophy and there's a soul and all that, but we don't really need to necessarily, because I don't think there's, it doesn't have to be a contradiction with what I'm going to say, which is that we're born, as infants, our first initial experience of existence is in the body, it's affect. Just everything goes into the body. We're like these sensory organisms.
Id.
Well, the id is, yeah, I mean,
The
that's like
baby is,
before the
yeah,
mind.
before
That's why I
the
asked what you
next
talk
bit.
about my having a mind, because we have all these different ideas about mind, but for me, mind is like a program that runs inside the body, like a digestive system, and that runs on words, language, images, memories and stuff. So that's just so just so my terms are clear. So then a baby doesn't have a mind any more than my cat has a mind, the way I mean mind. Obviously I don't mean that Maya isn't conscious, or that Tuco isn't conscious, or that they don't have personality. Just that they don't have these mental processing systems that are self-reflective, that relate to things like imagining the future, or dwelling on the past, or it's getting into self-consciousness, worrying about. So it's kind of like what I was saying about thinking.
Isn't one of the first things I think it does is distinguish itself from the world around it? It takes it a while to discover that the rattle is not part of it. That's one of the first things a baby does before they're conceptualizing much.
Yeah, and it's happening in the physical. It's through physical interaction with the environment.
That's
To
right.
bring it back to Tim's point actually, because I think that was a meatier one, which is, and Billy's, which is like, how do we discover who we are without going off and living in a cave? Not that I'm against that, but eventually you're going to have to come back from the cave and intermingle. Is this?
My next step is I went to the downtown east side for a couple months and I spent some time with the people on the street there, and they're very in your face, they know who they are. They've accepted that they're addicts or they're users or that they're prostitutes. They've accepted that.
Well, I wouldn't say that means they know who they are, though.
They've accepted that's who they are right now. Right? And so when you interact with them, you're generally interacting with authentic selves at that moment, which gives you an opportunity to be authentic yourself.
I think that's questionable. I don't think an addict can really be his authentic self. Not to denigrate addicts, but I mean...
I don't know, but if you do anything with enough repetition, it becomes instinct, it becomes part of who you
that
are.
speaks back to my point to earlier that automatic behaviour can never be an expression of the soul.
That's the other fellow, he can get his too.
Just a guy who walks down the street.
Behaving automatically, yes. Because it's reactive, like automatic behaviour is instilled in us. I don't want to, I'll end up on a soapbox and everyone will start disagreeing with me. I don't want to get dogmatic, but my understanding about this is automatic behaviour, to the extent that it's sourced in trauma, it's reactive and defensive. And all of us have, to some degree or another, these reactive defensive patterns of behaviour that have been programmed into us through adverse childhood experiences. And I would say that is the primary obstacle towards to expressing ourselves, to actually having the space and the calm and the presence for our authentic natures to emerge.
As you're talking a lot into a lot of things I've been learning here over the last 2 years. My father was a very, very strong personality, and for the first 21 years of my life. I'm only 34 now, so that's only 13 years or so that I've been able to work on who I am. But first that means stepping back from the person that he created.
Yeah.
That's what I'm in the process of right now.
Well, I would say anyone who's not in that process is probably not really living, spinning their wheels, let's say, because we're all imprinted by our upbringing and by our culture, and it's what they say about the familiar, the appeal of the familiar. And this can be really extreme, as in children who are raised in really hostile environments, they become addicted to pain and suffering. But even without going to that extreme, it does make it very hard to let go of the behaviors that prevent us from actually finding out who we are, just because they're familiar, they're so comfortable. And for me, I still love watching movies and TV shows in the evening. That's still my mode of relaxation. And that goes back to a time where, I don't remember very early childhood and the difficulties, whatever was going on then, but I remember the time when I was adolescent that was particularly tough because my mother was an alcoholic and a depressive. And so there was a period where she went really deep into depression. And she was an angry depressive, not just so she would flip from just being all, self-pitying mess to a raging sort of gorgon, dragon lady. So terrifying. That was my adolescence, and so I would tiptoe around the house trying to avoid her. And that was the time that I discovered Clint Eastwood, and that was the time that, because my mother did, I did have some power to get what I wanted. Partly because she was guilty, and I got her to give me a TV, and I got a TV in my room. So that whole process I described earlier, these were the sort of dynamics in which it was occurring. This very hostile environment, alone, my brother and sister left home, trying to avoid my mother, but at the same time getting what I needed to escape into this TV. And so that became like eating snack food, reading comic books, watching movies. That became my escape clause, matrix kind of.
I'm drawing a lot of personal correlations to your story. Like my first movie when my dad was a dad-like figure was Toy Story. But that's like my only good memory of the man. Walking on eggshells, trying not to draw attention to yourself for so many years of my life. I mentioned I got some public speaking experience. That's joining the theater group, trying to get over the fear of drawing attention to myself.
So because that speaks back to what I was saying about the basic appeal of movies is to see life and feel you're engaged with it without being seen. And this goes very deep, like it's predator avoidance programming. We've got to blend in and not be seen. So all of us have that to a greater or lesser degree. Like we want to be part of life, and we're social animals, so we want to be able to engage with living, but we kind of want to just be able to slip around without actually being noticed, except when we really want to be noticed. And it isn't really possible. Like what my process has been, and this is part of that process today, is putting myself in an endless series of situations in which I can't hide, so that I can learn to be absolutely comfortable in the most exposing situations. Not because I'm Rambo and I want to prove my mettle, but because I want to be comfortable in my skin and be able to relax so that what is within me can come out instead of those automatic behaviors.
It's like a desire to grow.
Coping mechanisms. Yeah. Yeah, well, I see it actually, and it is growth, but I see it as I understand it now as the trauma, because we can't process it mentally or emotionally when we're very young, and that's what makes it trauma. It goes into the body, and so then the body is full of these toxins. You could say all the chemicals of intense negative emotions that are released, that are activated by trauma, they get stuck in the body, and because of that we can't actually be in our bodies. So then the process is actually about clearing out all of those packages of trauma energy that we can actually land in our bodies. And the best way to do that is to find a safe space, like marriage, in which you'll constantly get triggered and all those feelings will be coming up, but you're safe enough not to react and just feed them and make them worse. So then you're actually feeling them and re-experiencing them without pushing them down, so then they can actually come out.
So you can deal with them, express them,
Mm-hmm.
grow from them, whatever it takes for you to be able to move forward.
Yeah, and some of it is acting them out. Like in marriage, I see a lot of what goes on in marriage is a sort of a bit like your theatre workshop, except it's real. You're acting out these patterns of trauma in a semi-conscious fashion, like you're treating the person that you love the most like shit, and you see yourself doing it, and you know you can't help it, but somehow it's part of the agreement, right, for better or for worse, right? So, okay,
if that person is a strong person, if that person's a strong person, say it's a spouse situation, as example, if that person is strong, they can help you through by recognizing and whatever goes on for healing that thing. But other people, they might be the strong one and they may crush that other spirit person that they're with it. I can see different ways of that panning out too, if they've made it so far as to be getting married and then start to show all these problems or things going on with them that they consider maybe something wrong, tough going on with you, then yeah, you could end up in those two scenarios. And I got lucky. Mike and I talk and communicate, so that does help us a lot. I'm a talker. He's obviously pretty quiet. So we overcompensate for each other. I talk more than I need to, and he doesn't talk enough in some ways, so we somehow meet in the middle. He gets sick of it, and so do I, and we talk and work things out.
The key thing is to me, I come from a big family, and how kids are. You have your relationships and all that stuff is your family dynamic, and how kids say, well, you can't tell about that, or you can't say about that because it's a secret.
Right.
And what I come to realize after I sobered up and ended up having Michelle come into my life was that nothing is a secret because you know. You know. Somebody knows that one thing, so it's not really a secret. And in a relationship, if you think you're going to become as one, there can't be any other person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that...
Hard as it may seem, sometimes. You know what I mean? Because there's always that fear. People have fear, we're built with fear. It's part of us. Healthy fear is good defense, but a fear that affects a part where, like,
The dark.
am I bigger than anything that affects me? And by affecting me, is it detrimental to those that I care about the most? If it is, you have a choice to make. You bury it, or you keep it out in the open.
Well, that, is speaking about toxins, and I think that I think about all secrets being toxic.
Just one of the things, Jason, is that mentioned the toxins, and that was part of it, is that to keep something hidden when it should be in the air,
Yeah.
because a poison can't live in the air.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. And that's the things that the toxins that stay in our body. Expressing them is a way to get them out, obviously. But often that can be just as simple as talking about them. And as you say, that actually those sorts of secrets, like family secrets, they're not necessarily secrets so much as things that you're not allowed to talk about. And in a way, you could look at the whole society like that. I mean, I was thinking about, you know, like I said, part of the thing about seen and not seen is about how movies are not what we think they are, culture is not what we think they are, that there's a social program of control and indoctrination and oppression that is inseparable from culture as it is. So no product is just what it appears to be. It's like a Trojan horse for infiltrating our psyches and putting little levers and hooks in so that we can be manipulated, right? All that. And I was thinking, well, you know, from a conversation I've had in Hope, most people probably know that. They probably kind of know that movie, I mean, especially now, in sort of the current age.
We have censor boards and rating programs.
The movie with
So.
Mark Wahlberg and is obviously bankrolled by the CIA, you know, one way or another. And there's a sort of just a sense that, yeah, this is the way things are, obviously different degrees, but. And yet people aren't talking about, they're still talking about movies as if they were just movies. So what is that?
That's the propaganda working.
Yeah, it's a sort of tacit agreement to be polite, and of course this is all part of the modern cultural thing, which is you've always got to encourage people and say positive things, and that I think it's all part of the way in which we get silenced. I mean, it would be hard for me to exaggerate how many times I've been accused of being negative. Ironically, often I feel quite positive when I'm talking about indoctrination or child abuse even. I mean, I don't want to sound like some sort of pervert, but it's not that I think it's a pleasant subject, but there's joy and liberation in being able to talk about these things. And I know that they can be healed by being looked at. So for me, it often is a positive expression. But somebody who doesn't want to go there, then they just perceive that as negative. So that's been an ongoing problem for me, actually. It's being perceived as negative. And I think there's something in me that is just temperamentally opposed to this silent complicity of avoiding the unpleasant realities in our lives, in our families, in our past, and in our culture. And it's like, I guess it's very basic, like if you're a child growing up in an environment and you can't actually say the things that you most need to say, and you can't cry out and ask for help, and you can't challenge the authorities that are making your life unbearable, then you learn to shut down your ability to express. So then as adults, in order to kind of rediscover our ability to express and be present and be who we are, there's a lot of focus on negative stuff. We actually have to learn how to say no, how to say fuck you, how to complain, how to say this is hell, this is no good, without obviously being, you know, a whiny, self-indulgent and self-pitying, and it can go, there are people who go to the other extreme. But I think probably most people here, and I think most people generally, they don't go to that extreme. They stay in this extreme of just, let's always focus on the positive, let's always be encouraging, let's always be, you know, nice and civil. You know, I have learned in life to be that way because I would overcompensate. I was generally an aggressive, sort of provocative sort of person.
You say that has a scale too, because I'm quite say that I'm unrealistic, because I'm a positive potentialist. I see our potential and I hope it goes in a positive direction.
Yeah.
And you're like, you're not being realistic.
But see, my idea of positivity is an ability to look unflinchingly at what is negative and maintain a positive attitude. Not as an attitude really, but because an attitude sounds a bit naff, but just not be discouraged, however bad things look. To not be discouraged by that, because of the joy in actually facing reality. I don't think there's any substitute for the joy of facing reality. It doesn't matter how bad it is. It's so liberating, because then we can let go of all of our defenses and subterfuges that prevented us from seeing reality, and then we're free. We may be free in a hellish reality, but it's better to be free in, I was going to say something like this for that, but it's better to be free in a difficult reality than to be imprisoned in, a seemingly pleasant one.
Matrix.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, that's it. Remember in Matrix when he said, gee, I wish I'd known this ahead of time, I would have taken the other route.
The answer would be to the heckler in the audience, would be that there's nothing more enjoyable or more meaningful than being oneself.
The hellish reality.
Well, that's an extreme. I mean, I don't think the reality would remain hellish if one were able to live in it and move in it in a way that was free, true and honest, that would transform. But if we're willing to compromise who we are in order that our reality doesn't get too difficult, then it will never, we'll never actually find out.
So there isn't ignorance is bliss.
That's just what I'm saying. Isn't ignorance bliss?
I think like I said, I still watch movies, right? I know all this, and yet I still watch movies and TV shows. It's a good question. Why do I do that?
It's like eating food that's bad for you. We all do. We
We
know
all
what we
do
should
it.
eat, but
And so-
sometimes we just enjoy it.
Some part of us does need the bliss of ignorance.
Even though you're being programmed doesn't mean you can enjoy.
No, and it doesn't necessarily work to bring the whip down and say, I will be authentic in every moment and I will never submit to any kind of compromise. The people that are like that are insufferable.
Very seldom.
Because they become self-righteous in their spiritual superiority.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work, it becomes another identity. So yeah, there's a place for the bliss of ignorance, for sure. But we all know, like when we cross the line between just a bit of downtime, relax, and just pretend that, we're just kids again, and when we start feeling sick and tired and self-loathing, and we used to go a bit over the line, and
I don't like to
come
speak-
back again.
I don't like to speak in absolutes, but I think that the only people we can actually say that ignorance is bliss are those who are beyond ignorance. Like, unless you know, you don't know. You live in paradise, but until you see hell, you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, each of us has, not that we all exist in separate realities, but we all have our own personal reality that we've been avoiding. But both in the present and in the past.
And creating. We create our own reality.
Well, I don't personally believe that. I think there's an element of that. Of course, our behaviour, determines our circumstances. But I don't believe it in the New Age sense. I guess you mean in that sense. But yeah, taking responsibility for our circumstances, I think, is honest. Never mind that it's effective and right, but it's also honest that where we are in this given moment is the sum total of all our actions and decisions that led up to this point. But where I say there is a factor generally not acknowledged is that to the extent that we were interfered with as children, we've been acting automatically from so early on that where we've ended up, it's like we can't take responsibility for it until we, I guess, see that, see how compulsive our behaviours have been. And we're not actually responsible for being interfered with.
If we have these abilities to cover over our trauma and make these lies that make us able to cope with what we're experiencing as children and whatnot, why do we even have those knee-jerk reactions if we're supposed to unpack them in the first place?
Which knee-jerk reaction?
All these
Get
abilities,
triggered.
these abilities to cover over trauma and make these lies of,
Why do we dissociate? You mean?
sure, there's many different ways to ask the question, but if we're supposed to go past this ignorance is bliss and try to find the real reality and unpack all this stuff that we're covering up over our childhood,
Yeah.
why does that even exist in the first place?
The dissociative mechanism.
Yeah.
Well, that's because
Why are we
children
not-
can't take responsibility for their actions. They can't deal with those circumstances. So we have that innate capacity in ourselves to dissociate in order to survive.
But why do we have that innate one if we're supposed to fight against it?
You're not supposed to fight against it.
Unpack it or
Well,
reverse
but
it?
it's not. I think you're sort of reframing it in a way that doesn't quite make sense, because it's not about not dissociating anymore or even undoing the past. It's about just recognizing that we have dissociated. So then if you dissociate, you want to reassociate.
Yes, but the whole point of the process is not to recognize it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
but the
to
trauma,
bring it
but
to-
nothing's happening now. There's no need to be dissociated now. It's already in the past. So unless you want to live in the past, which, well, I mean, the problem with that is you can't actually show up in the present, because not all of us is there.
Okay.
That was easy. I thought it was going to be much harder.
Jason, it might be interesting to talk about Norman O'Brown's idea about trauma and how it goes into the body and then it becomes like our religion. I can't remember exactly what that was, but you're like, no.
How much time do we got?
No, I wasn't. I was seeing it was still recording, but yeah, how much time do we have? Like, who? Any questions?
I just found most of what you've been speaking about is really timely and synchronistic to what John and I have been talking about being present in relationship, and for me, just noticing something that gets triggered over and over again, and looking at it and saying, sometimes I don't know if I can change this, and the minute I hear it outside myself, it begins to change, because we're always changing. And the other thing is, 2 days ago we were just speaking about this idea of putting ourselves to be seen, and because we both have trauma around that, and so what you're doing and how comfortable you are right at this moment and is really quite interesting for us to see, that when I've had to be in front of, well, the first time I think I can remember lately that happened was at a death where I was asked to speak. And I wanted not to be there and not to have to do it, but I did. But the whole thing, the experience was the persona that I found myself trying to live in, to do it, to be able to be there.
Yeah.
And to step into being seen more. And what you were saying, John, about the idea that when you put yourself there, you find out that you're stronger than you knew you were, and that there are ways, I'm not speaking going into the persona because I don't think that's exactly strong. That's one way we manage, I think. But that we find that we can be ourselves in some part of that, and whatever that means at the moment, where we're comfortable inside ourselves being exposed.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know a lot about it.
It's about not dissolving fear, but realizing that you can actually handle it. And learning that part. When you're afraid of something and then you expose yourself to it, you're not trying to dissolve that for whatever you're afraid of. You're realizing that you're actually stronger than you thought you were. That was Jordan Peterson. I like it.
That's funny, because I was going to ask about this whole idea of being strong. Like, who feels that that's a good saying, like to be stronger?
Well, competent.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, to realize that you have a lot more competency in you to cope with whatever situation you're afraid of.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing.
I think it is too, but I tend to see it as a means rather than an end.
Yeah, well, when you're a child, you don't have that power, right? And so you disassociate. But when you're older, and you actually have that power and the ability to deal with the situation, I think that's how you let go of those disassociations and come back to reality. I think like that's your tool to come back. Because if you didn't have that, then you're just stuck, always disassociated.
Yeah. I think it's something, I think the main thing for me is being physically engaged with reality, and that competence is part of that. Absolutely. Like if I wasn't a competent speaker and a competent writer, I wouldn't put myself out here, but it isn't really to develop, or at least certainly isn't just to show that I'm competent, and it isn't.
No, it's to realize you are. Like the first time you go to public speak, if you're like afraid of it, you kind of stop from opening up. But once you actually do it, and then you realize, yeah, I can do this. This is not. It wasn't what I thought it was. I'm competent to do it. Then the next time you do it, you don't have that wall in front of you.
Yeah.
You don't have
So what I'm questioning is where's that leading? Because like Jordan Peterson, well, he's developed these skills. He can now travel the world and talk with audiences of thousands of people and be this great public figure. But where's that actually leading? I can see a trajectory like that for myself. I was very happy that so many people showed up. So it made it more energized, and more dynamic, and more interesting for me. More of a challenge and so on, but I think like my primary relationship is with this authentic self that we've referred to here that I don't have full access to. Like I'm trying to gain access to that. I'm hesitant to use the soul word, because we have at least one ex-Christian here, and actually it was one of the questions that I was going to ask at the very beginning, like a week ago, and I'm still trying to formulate how to present this, was, who's sort of a survey, like who in the audience considers himself religious, who considers himself spiritual, who considers himself agnostic, who considers himself atheist, just to get a sense of who was in the room. I don't necessarily want to do that because it seems too contrived now, but just to raise that thing, you might not even know really. But yeah, so the ex-Christian's leaving the room.
Well, let's talk about him.
Oh, I thought you were talking about me. I've been all four, so I can argue all 4 points. Authentically.
Yeah. Well, I've been all four.
True spiritual journey. You
I
have
don't
to.
think I was ever agnostic, actually. I don't think I ever admitted that I didn't know. But anyway, it is a difficult thing to talk. I feel I have to talk around it. But back to this point about facing fear and becoming competent. My own trajectory has to do with the last part that I read, that the only way for me to really find out who I am has been to express it. And so I don't know who I am or what I have to express until it comes out, and then I get to see it. And I think that's how we experience our soul nature, our essential nature as soul beings. Whatever that means, but it's more than physical, but it has to come through the body, it has to land in the body and be expressed. And so yeah, having competence and facing fears is definitely essential to that. But the actual thing that happens, sort of paradoxically and ironically, it could happen at any time. You don't need an audience, you don't need a script, you don't need skills. It's just you and you, right? It's just your soul landing in the body where it was always supposed to be. And well, yeah, my way has been communication and sort of performance and sharing, and so in order for me to do that, I've had to feel that I had something to communicate, something meaningful, intelligent ideas and words and the rest of it. But more and more I realized that that isn't it. Actually, that's just what's necessary for me to feel comfortable enough that I can express who I am, and then you get to experience who you are by receiving the transmission of who I am. And then something happens. Nothing that I say is relevant to that, and none of my skills are relevant. Just like being actually present. If we're in the presence of somebody who is present, we become more present. And then there's presence. Things happen.
Well, and then that might also tie back to, you asked what would become of people, I'll change the word, but what would be the end result of people becoming empowered? And so what you just said about the people becoming more present in the wake of someone else being present, I mean, it's just like, it's, I guess, a potential for positive change, whether it be people being empowered by fearful of not knowing how to construct something and they do it, and then they become, you know, they realize that they can do it, and vice versa with public speaking. Someone who sits here and is observing you being present, then possibly they can be more present themselves and create positive change in the future. It could, I mean, or it could work totally opposite and be a negative.
Well, but what's more positive than being present? Like, there's a sort of contradiction in that, because if you're being present in order to bring positive change in the future, then that's not in the present, right?
Yeah, the present could, yeah, that's true.
And that's where my question is with someone like JBP or somebody who's becoming this big cultural figure. They're bringing about positive change, I don't doubt that, but it's social, it's social.
Yeah.
But what is the value in positive social change? It's all gonna be gone.
What's the danger in negative social? What's the danger in negative?
Yeah, but utopia will become dust anyway, right? So,
Let's just not go
I mean,
Very Buddhist now.
yes, but it's also factual, right?
Yeah.
The only thing that counts is what's eternal. And if there's nothing eternal, well, nothing counts when you're a nihilist. But
So nobody was wrong.
unless there's
This is what
the thing that you went to the bathroom not to hear, unless there's
Just one sentence, it all came down. Yeah, I found peace in the washroom.
Experience.
Well, we can go down the same route. What's the point of even trying to find out who you are? Then you're just going to die at the end of it.
so that the dying
Because
is
we're
the
more
problem.
than a body. It's the body that
I mean, it isn't actually, you tricked me into that question. Into that answer, because it can't be a what for. I can't do it in order for this, because that's that thing again. It's like trying to improve and build and move towards something. And
You talked about enlightenment before, though.
yeah, I did, the experience of the soul. The
That's
soul fully landed in the body.
what is that existence?
It is a block. Huh?
What is that? Like, what does that look like? Does anybody actually have that?
I don't know. I mean, I know someone who I think has it, but that's just...
I've had moments of it, it feels great.
Is it what?
Is it me?
Well, Thich Nhat Hanh says that enlightenment is, to become enlightened, you chop wood and carry water, and to maintain it, you chop wood and carry water.
It is just living.
Yeah.
It's living. So in a way, we're all doing
So maybe
it.
that's what Jordan Peterson
Yeah, I
is
would
looking for too.
Yeah.
Well, I don't, well, maybe. That's what I said, maybe.
That's
But
very
maybe,
generous.
maybe not. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to stick on Jordan Peterson, but the medium is more important than the message. So how someone is actually being in the moment of conveying the message, that's the thing that counts in my view. And somebody can have a really great message, but their way of being might actually not support it or even contradict it. So, like I say, for me, I feel strongly about movies and all this stuff in my own books, but what I really feel strongly about is connecting to the people in this room and experiencing myself through that connection. And I'm much more able to do that by talking about things that are meaningful to me. And that means I want them to become meaningful to you, otherwise you're just sitting there, waiting for them to leave, right? So, but none of that stuff is really matters. The movies and all that stuff, and the secret of life itself doesn't matter. It's just a mental construct in the end. And so, why isn't this in the seedling? Isn't it on seedling number one? It's important to remember that nothing matters.
I think it was two. It was after you took the shot of the picture of the burned out building. Yeah, I think it was two.
You have it memorized, Katie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So it's like there's a sort of there's a way of freedom that is not nihilistic. It doesn't negate and say nothing means anything. It embraces that nothing means anything, and yet we're here.
Well, it goes back on itself. How can something be important to remember if it doesn't matter?
That was the joke. That was the joke.
Just in case people didn't get it.
Yeah.
So are children more authentic, would you say? More authentic to themselves if they haven't been
Pushed down.
yeah, if people
Influenced
haven't,
by social.
yeah. Or maybe also would you say that people who are autistic are a little less, or a little bit more authentic than, like more authentically themselves? Because they're not trying to be like, they're not impersonating other people?
Unless they literally are.
Or unless
Yeah.
they're really trying to, yeah.
Yeah.
They just have different ways of covering it.
I think, I don't think you can talk about, well, certainly not with autistics, I don't think you could generalise like that, because they can go to the other extreme too and be super inauthentic. But I actually don't like the word authentic, but it's come up. But children, I think you could somewhat generalise. I mean, certainly Maya here today, you know that Maya isn't putting on airs, she's not pretending to be someone she's not.
But she has virtually no beliefs, memories, or preferences.
Right, exactly.
So what kind of an energy do you leave her?
She's got a couple.
Do I leave?
I would
Well,
say
I
she
mean-
has preferences.
She likes to be warm, she likes to be
Well,
fed.
I'm not saying she had none.
She does have that.
I'm not saying, but, so you're reducing it to the simplest ones? Is that the ones that are? I see, I have trouble saying that it's more authentic to be a baby than, or a child than it is to be someone who's been introspective for a period of time. Why would that be?
Well, just because there's less baggage and clutter, so there's less actually built up on top of. A baby may be very limited, but when
It's the thing about a teacup, a teacup is full and a gallon bucket is full, but they hold different amount.
well, it's more like the percentage of Maya's expression as an infant
Is real.
is very high.
That's right.
The authentic stuff. There's very little, well, probably no, dissembling, deception.
Manipulative behavior is real?
In a baby?
And anyone,
Do I think it's real that people can manipulate?
that people, see, the thing is, I've had babies, and I know what they do.
Mhm.
They manipulate constantly to get their way. And yet, you would say that's not authentic in a person, in an adult.
Well, it would be very different. I mean, I don't necessarily agree that babies manipulate, but then that would be semantic. But they certainly they try to get what they want.
Yeah, they try to get by causing you to do
Because
what they
they
want.
die if they don't get it.
Well, no, that's
That's
not necessarily true.
well, generally speaking, I mean, they can die even from not being touched. Babies.
Oh,
Or
yes,
spoken
that's
to,
right, yeah.
Can I
Certainly extreme.
speak into this? My mom was a prenatal teacher,
Yeah.
still is, and a very fascinating subject. She taught me everything she knows at one point. And one of the things that really popped out is that children are sociopaths until you teach them not to be.
And then you come again when they're teenagers.
Well, the problem is, many of the problems that are going on with the youth nowadays is they never got trained out of that childlike
That's a
behavior.
Jordan Peterson thing as well.
Well, that's a government telling us how to raise kids.
I think that's the compensation for that whole noble savage ethos that grew up in the centuries. That basically, children are pure and savages are noble, because that's not true either. That's too extreme, and so then I think it's kind of compensatory to then say, well, children are sociopaths. I mean, that's I don't think that's accurate because
Lord of the Flies is pretty traumatizing to me, man.
I mean, Shakespeare said that if an infant had the power to pull down the sun, it would destroy the world, or something like that.
Okay, just for a second.
Right.
I want to thank you. I really enjoyed this, but I have to go because I've got a family thing going on and I need to, I've taken 2 hours out of it and I got to respond.
Well, thanks very
No,
much.
thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I already own one. Just say who we are.
That's just in case you're
Thank you
interested
for
in
coming.
future events.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's
Enjoyed
it.
that.
Yeah, you know, I will.
Thank you.
But I already have the book, so.
Anyway,
Salad.
that's gone on rather long, so,
It's 5 o'clock now,
yeah.
so it's 2 hours. Yeah, it's 5 o'clock. So it's probably a good time to.
Yeah, I think